So I'd like to introduce a little the CFCI, the CFC Institute. So the CFC Institute is the training arm of Couples for Christ, especially for leaders. And we have 4 platforms, or what we call, Ruel would call as the specializations. So we have missions, and this is one of our most developed specialization. And we have offered 6 courses already of the Missions 101, and I see 1 graduate from the Handmaids of the Lord and many graduates from the different ministries. And we hope that more of you will be able to join Missions 101. And then we also have, for the leadership, part of that is the pastoral care training, and we will be offering a 1-day training soon. So please watch out for that, and we hope that you will also be able to attend that. The other one is human development, and there will be a lecture on human development on Saturday in Lay Force at 2 o'clock ba? At 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And for those of you who are available, we hope that you can also be there. It's a sacred space, no? Okay. So, and the last one is on family. Okay, family life. And please expect also that there will be some lecture series on that. All right. So without much ado, I'd like to introduce to you our speaker this afternoon, none other than the training director of the CFC Institute, about to get his MA in Theology and Missiology from the San Carlos Seminary, and ano ba, college ba siya? Institute. Okay, institute. And so let me call on our brother Ruel Aguirre.
Right. Thank you very much for coming over. I'm very much happy that you're all here. As Tita Bernie said a while ago, this is the first time that we're having our online lecture. So together with the people that we are with right now in this room, we also invited family ministries from the different parts of the world to join us, so that at the end of this lecture, because it's the first lecture, then we can get comments from them on how we can also improve the way we serve the mission and life of Couples for Christ as a whole. Okay po, for this lecture, I've just tried to see how the things that I've learned in school, okay, gathered all of those important points, and then how to apply it in what we do in Couples for Christ. Because I always believe that if we are not the biggest or the only lay missionary that sends people to different parts of the world, we are one of those groups, lay institutions that sends people, aside from the religious congregations. No? So, as you all know as well, that October is Missions Month. That's why we also came up with a lecture to support our celebration of October being the Missions Month of the Church. Okay, so for the next hour, okay, I'll be presenting to you principles, and at the end, we'll try to apply these principles on how we do mission in Couples for Christ. So this is the format of what we will do for the entire day, for the entire afternoon. Okay po, so let's start po. Okay, there. So that's the title of our lecture for this afternoon, the how-tos of cultural evangelization. This is brought to you by CFC Institute, Ablaze Communications, and Couples for Christ. Okay po, we have 3 objectives for this lecture. First one is we'll be defining principles of faith and culture. So later you'll get to know principles behind our faith, our Catholic faith, our Christian faith, and principles about culture, the culture of human beings. Okay. Second, we'll present the connection of faith, culture, and evangelization. Is there a connection between the 3? Will evangelization benefit a lot if we understand the principles of culture and faith? So we'll define that later po. So you'll see the connections of these 3 terms. And lastly, we want to clarify questions, initiate discussion, and gather suggestions among attendees on ways on how to approach evangelization in the international missions and here in the country, okay, in the Philippines. So these are the 3 objectives that we will try to clarify or hit at the end of this lecture. Okay Okay po, so let's start po. Let's talk about first the CFC Life and Mission so that we can understand the context of where we are as a community. Based on our CFC statutes, I do hope that being regional coordinators, you have your own copy of the CFC statutes. Based on the CFC statutes 1.1, it says, Corpus Christ, okay, is committed to the work of global evangelization. That's the first article of our statutes. So that's the purpose, okay? That's our nature. We're committed to the work of evangelization. And being a community of family renewal, how do we do it? Okay. We build the church of the home, and we build the church of the poor. Being a family renewal community, our Christian family renewal is very much fulfilled in 4 levels. First, the individual, where we proclaim the gospel anew. Okay. Second, after the individual, okay, the family. Okay, when individuals are renewed, then their relation as husband and wife is strengthened, and also a result of which is the family is strengthened. Third, the church. So after the individual, family, we've got the church. The church, all Christian families, okay, they gather together, they strengthen one another. But at the same time, it also strengthens the entire church, the universal church. And lastly, society. Okay, so those are the 4 levels. Society, we do not just raise up holy men and women, okay, but we also want to raise people who are good citizens of their respective countries, wherever they come from. So these are the 4 levels, okay, of how we do renewal in Corpus Christ. But more so, that happens through the fulfillment of our mission, building the church of the home and building the church of the poor. We achieve that by, what is the entry point? It's either the youth camp. You've got the youth camp for YFC. You've got the kids camp for KFC. You've got the CLP, the Christian Life Program, for CFC, for handmaids of the Lord and servants of the Lord. This is the entry point. Okay? And after that, okay, after attending the CLP, after finishing the CLP or the youth camps, they attend the formation. So we've got different formations. But it's the goal of the formation is to have fellowship of believers, which is based on Acts 2, 42, 47. Is the verse familiar to you? What's Acts 2, 42, 47? That's the fellowship of believers, where the early Christian communities, okay, are described, okay, to break bread together in their homes. They go to the temple and worship together. Okay, they sell what they own, okay, and then distribute it to each one according to their need. That's the goal of formation. For us to build a community where we share, where we love, where we worship the Lord together. Okay, so this is the life and mission of Corpus Christ. We express our life and mission Corpus Christ through the CLPs, the youth camps, and the formation. Okay. Now we go now to the international CFC community. We are now present in 117, so you can write it down. This is as hot as today, okay? From the coordinator of the Evangelization Missions Office, Nick Escalona. I texted him this afternoon. I asked him, Nick, how many countries and territories are we present now? So as of today, we're 117 countries and territories. So that includes Hong Kong, Macau. What are other territories? Hong Kong, Macau, and the like. Okay, so there. Okay, so it's a mixture, not only countries but territories. Okay, now. Okay. What are the countries where our brothers and sisters in Corpus Christ are not majority non-Filipinos or who has a Filipino descent? Can you state countries where this is the description of Corpus Christ? We've got Africa. Almost all countries in Africa, members there are almost 99% Africans, meaning there are no non-Filipinos. There are non-Filipinos or Filipinos, except for perhaps in Botswana where there's a few of them who are Filipinos. But when we talk about the continent of Africa, majority are Africans. We can talk about, what else? China. Okay, we can talk about Latin America. Okay, most of them are Latinos. Okay, there are only a few members there who are Filipinos. We talk about the Pacific Island countries, Vanuatu, Solomon Islands. We talk about PNG, Palau. These are all, most of our brothers and sisters there are non-Filipinos. We can talk about Indonesia. We can talk about Timor-Leste, Malaysia. Okay, there are a lot of non-Filipinos based in those countries. Okay. And what is the good thing about our statutes? Because we are a mixture of Filipinos and non-Filipinos, it also states in CFC, in our statute 7.222 to be precise, CFC does recognize the need for local cultural adaptation in some cases, as long as such does not compromise the essentials of CFC life and as long as the same is approved by the CFC International Council. We're always governed by three principles in Corpus Christ. Okay? Are you aware of the three principles where we are governed? First, unity and uniformity. Second is interdependence. And third is accountability. So these are very much important principles in Corpus Christ. First is unity and uniformity. Second is interdependence. And third is accountability. Okay, so now you've seen the picture of what is the purpose of Corpus Christ in its nature, and our picture of Corpus Christ in the international missions. Okay. So let's now go to the realities of Corpus Christ. Please raise your hand if you do not agree with the figures or with what's projected on the screen. First, the leadership and membership of CFC are mostly, okay, or big chunk of that are Filipinos. If you take it as a whole, Philippines included. Okay, Philippines, 117 countries plus the Philippines, majority of the members and leaders of Corpus Christ are Filipinos. But in the worldwide, when you talk about international missions, it's only 0.5% have non-Filipino descent, or there are non-Filipinos, or perhaps there are Filipinos or Australians. We take them out because they're still Filipinos. Okay, but it's only 0.5% when you get the total population. Okay, including the Philippines, it's just 0.5%. But in the international missions, we've got, take into consideration China, Timor-Leste, African countries. When you sum it all up, okay, and then compare it to the CFC population of the international missions, non-Filipino descent is only 30%. So, 70% are still Filipinos. So why am I pointing it out? Because if there are a lot of Filipinos in Corpus Christ, even in the international mission, okay, there's a big tendency to always express the way we do things the Filipino way. There's a big tendency to always project our Filipino culture. Not just in the membership, but even in the leadership. You are all you are all regional coordinators of the different parts of the world, Filipinos. Most of the country coordinators are Filipinos. Most of the regional coordinators in the international mission are Filipinos. Most of the people, the local leaders in the Middle East are Filipinos. Singapore, Filipinos. What else? The US, Canada, Filipinos. Okay? So, we can state that, with that, there's a strong Filipino culture. Okay. When you talk about strong Filipino culture, if I may add, we talk about the food that we serve, mostly adobo, skyflakes, okay, pansit, okay, spaghetti na matamis, okay. That's Filipino culture. When you talk about communication, when we communicate amongst others, if you've been to different places, it's mostly Tagalog, especially whenever people, Filipinos gather together. I guess they miss speaking the native tongue, so the tendency is to speak in Tagalog. Or they address people like tito, tita, kuya, ate. When younger wife sees greet those who are older than them, they address them po, opo. These are all Filipinos. Okay, these are all Filipino, part of the Filipino culture. Okay, when we do respect, you can see Australian passport holders who are also Filipinos. They take the hand of the older person, then put it in their forehead. Mano. even though their passport tells them they're Australian or they're American or Canadian, still mano, because it's a Filipino way of, it's a Filipino gesture to show respect. Okay? Filipino time. I was in New Zealand. A few months ago. I went to a Nike shop. Okay, and then one of the Kiwis who are selling the shoes, okay, came out of the cashier. He has his lapel mic, and because it's already sale time, you know, in other countries they always have a sale time. The shoes displayed are already 30% off. So on a particular time of the day, an employee will go out of the cashier, and then they will just announce to everyone that on this particular time, it's sale time. So the 30% will also be marked down up to 50% off or more than that. So the Kiwi, okay, said, okay, in 5 minutes, Kiwi time, will start our sale. It's not Filipino time, it's Kiwi time. So it denotes that when you talk about Filipino time, it's late. Okay? That's from a person who is Kiwi, not from a Filipino. Okay? Next, migration. Migration, it's a big phenomenon. Okay? Migration is a very big phenomenon, especially amongst citizens of third world countries. Okay. Okay. Why? Why is it a big a phenomenon? And I think it will always be a phenomenon in the future. Because if CFC members or leaders are given a chance to migrate or to look for a greener pasture outside the Philippines, they will grab it. Okay? Because of our state here in the country, because of the economy, because other countries can offer greener pasture. Okay? If that is the case, then CFC members from the Philippines will go to a different country, they'll look for couples for Christ there, connect with them, bring their families there, so their migration will always be a reality for couples for Christ. Not only for the entire Filipino nation, but for couples for Christ. That's a big reality. Not only for this present time, but I think it will always be a big phenomenon in the future. Third, the dynamics of formation and activities. Have you ever asked yourself, what is the influence of how we sing songs in Couples for Christ? Have you ever asked yourself, what is the influence of how we sing songs in Couples for Christ? The big influence of which comes from the Western culture. The way we sing fast songs, it's the Western type of culture. Okay? Compare the way we sing fast songs to the way that our Chinese brethren sing fast songs. You cannot compare it because it's totally different. You compare the way we sing songs here in the Philippines, okay, or Filipinos, the way we sing songs, the fast songs, compare it to the Africans, it's totally different. It's totally different. Our beat is different from theirs. That's a big difference. And if singing songs can connect them to God, and they sing songs the way we sing songs, which is Western influence, then how can they connect to God? Okay. Most of our songs are written in English. And if you go to China, they always translate it using Mandarin. Ano tawag po dyan? Pinyin. Okay? At times, you won't even know, if you are not very familiar with Mandarin, you won't even know if the spirit behind the translation is still right. If they still capture the spirit of the song. Because they translate it from English to Mandarin using the beat, the rhythm, the melody of a Western influenced song. Dynamics. Dynamics language. All of our formation are written in English. There are only a few Filipino leaders in Couples for Christ who have a good grasp of English and another foreign language, like for example French or Mandarin. So what's the problem? The reality is, if you translate directly what's written in English and you don't have a good grasp of another foreign word or language, then you might lose in translation. The message might be lost in translation along the way. That's the reality of Couples for Christ, of the dynamics and the formation here in Couples for Christ. Even in the expression or the activities after the talks in the conferences or the retreats. I was in Nepal with Mahan a few weeks back, and we had the strong and faithful activity. There's an activity there where the men will give flowers as a gesture of their love, expression of their love to their wife. They followed it. They brought flowers. They gave it to the husbands, and when the cue came for the husbands to give the flower, no one moved. No one moved. And I asked our CFC Nepal leader, how come? It's not our own way of expressing love. Men don't really give flowers to women. Cultural. Nepali culture. So if that's how we do things, if we always say that you follow what's written in the manual, and that's written in the manual which is not really connected to the culture, can we really express what we want to say in our activities? These are the realities, brothers and sisters. Okay. So, what's the point? The point is, CFC will always come across various cultures of people. Wherever you go, in different countries, you'll always encounter various cultures. Even here in the Philippines, if you go to a different province, it's a different culture. A rural culture is different from an urban culture. Wherever we go, because of Matthew, because of the Great Commission, we'll always encounter culture. Okay? So, with that, I want to raise a question. What is a certain way to initiate and sustain evangelization? If our purpose is to evangelize the whole world because our vision is families in the Holy Spirit, renewing the face of the earth, by building the church of the home and the church of the poor, and we are present in 117 countries, and CFC's mission will always cannot avoid encounter with different culture, then this, I think, is the question. What is a certain way to initiate and sustain evangelization? How can we raise the 0.5% of non-Filipinos to perhaps 10%? How can we raise a 30% percentage of non-Filipinos in the international mission to perhaps 50%? But it's not just evangelizing, but sustaining, but letting them stay in Corpus Christ. That's the next question. How? What is the strategy? Okay na po. Understanding churches' perspectives. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to raise your hand. Kuya.
So what is the Nepal way of expressing love?
The Nepali way of expressing love is not through flowers, but just serving people. The husband serving the wife serving the husband. It's their number one way of expressing their love.
Acts of service.
Yes. It's not really, it's a Western type of thing when you give a flower. Okay? Yes. Okay po. Okay, so what is, how can we now,
How can you give flowers to the wind?
Guadalupe. Okay. Understanding churches' perspectives. Okay, I want to now give you a better understanding, a good understanding of different terms. First, we'll start with culture. What is culture? According to Sir Edward Tyler, an anthropologist, he says culture is a complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. Okay, so culture. For Filipinos, whenever we want to get a person's attention, we say, psst. Di po ba? Culture is a means of communication. Culture is a means for a society to thrive. They need to have a culture to communicate. A certain group of people needs to have a culture for them to thrive as a society. That's culture. So in our way of communicating, if you want to catch the attention of a person, you say psst, psst. Okay? I saw a barker, I think it's along Aurora, there in Cubao. Aurora, in front of the famous Axe Theater. I think you know where Axe Theater is. Instead of saying, Quiapo, 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 he says, psst, 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 and people will always look at him. Because it's our way of communication. A surest way to catch a person's attention. Psst. Whenever we give directions, Pinoys do this. Unconsciously, we do that. Okay? Where? Di po ba? Natatawa kayo unconsciously. That's true. That's how we give directions there. Okay? Lip pointing. Okay? Whenever a Nepali person wants to greet hello, they do like this. It's not only the Hindus, but even the Catholics do like this. And they say, Jesu Baray. That's saying hi. Hi. Okay? Thailand. It's a Buddhist way, but that's your culture. Even Catholics do that. Okay? Nepali, whenever they go to Mass, they don't sit on chairs. They sit on the floor. There are actually no chairs in Nepal, in the churches in Nepal. They sit on the floor. There's just a cushion and you sit there because it's culture. It's culture. When you go to the village, there are really no chairs. They sit on the floor. They eat a meal sitting on the floor. When you talk about Africa, okay? There's a proverb that says, it takes a village to raise a child. Okay, so whenever we talk about rearing a child, it's not just the immediate parents, but even the uncles, the aunts, the grandmother, the grandfather have a responsibility to raise the child because that's culture. Okay, in Africa, there's also a culture that you need to bear a child first before you go to before you receive the sacrament of matrimony. That's a prevailing culture in Africa. You need to prove first the fertility of the woman before the man can bring her to the altar and get married. That's culture. Okay. New Zealand. Okay. In New Zealand, amongst the Maori people, the locals of New Zealand, they love nature. They love nature. So most of the laws in the land in New Zealand takes care of nature because the local people, the Maori, loves nature. They connect themselves, they connect their lives to nature, culture. It's not just the ideas, the belief, or the knowledge, the belief of that we follow in a particular culture, but even the ideas. The ideas you communicate is also part of culture. Okay, for example, when you say, "I'll go to a wake," you're a Filipino. What's the usual color of the shirt that you will wear? It's either black or dark colored, never white. Okay, but in the Chinese culture, it should be white because that's the color of mourning. Ideas. It's different. It's different. Okay. Yes. Okay. We talk about rain. Okay. We talk about rain. Ulan. Filipinos usually get scared when there's rain, especially if it's strong rain. Why? Because rain is associated with flood. But for the African culture, when we talk about rain, they're happy because that's life. It will bring good harvest to the crops. It will give water for their animals. They are happy when there is rain, especially if there's strong rain. Actually, exactly, even in the province, okay, yeah, amongst the farmers, when it rains, they're happy because there's irrigation, there's water for the rice fields. Rain in Botswana, because they love water, rain, they named their currency to Pula. Pula is directly translated to English as water or rain. See? Culture. Ideas. Okay, next. Enculturation. Cultural learning process of the individual, the process by which a person is inserted into his or her culture. That's what Alward Shorter, an anthropologist, which is also a missiologist, and that's how he describes enculturation. Enculturation is the way a person learns the culture of a society he or she belongs to. When you raise a child, okay, Okay? You teach the child, you say po and opo. That's enculturation. When the child learns how to say po and opo, that's enculturation. E-N, not I-N. E-N. That's a sociological terminology. When you are in a Western world and a young man, okay, learns how to address a respect to an older person, he doesn't say po and opo. They can say auntie, uncle, or by first name basis. That's not disrespectful because that's culture. They learn the culture. Eating, for instance, in China, you teach a child to eat congee in the morning, peanuts, vegetables. The way I discovered the way they cook in China is different on how they cook here in the Philippines, especially in Chinatown. The food there is bland. You need to bring salt or seasoning. But here in Chinatown, it's sweet because it's tailor-fitted to the taste of the Filipino Chinese. Okay? That's different. Okay. In the Filipino way, when you eat, have you ever noticed this? When you eat, it's innate for us to ask people, kain na. Kain po tayo. You invite them, even though that at the back of your mind, kulang to kakainin ko. Okay? You invite them, kain po. But in Africa, doesn't go that way. When they eat alone. They don't invite people. That's culture. Okay? So the process of learning that culture, it's enculturation. Okay? Pamanikan, that's enculturation. When a man that's about to be married to a woman learns how to follow the customs of Filipino in terms of getting married, in line with marriage, pamanikan, you teach that. He learns that. Okay? And lastly, acculturation. Acculturation is encounter between culture and another, or the encounter between cultures. That's based on Alward Shorter, anthropologist. So when a Filipino culture and a Chinese culture encounter, meets, the exchange of ideas, that's acculturation. Okay, for example, before, there is no such term as selfie or groupie. We borrowed that term, use it in the Filipino culture, that when you say it's selfie, you take a picture all by yourself using a photo. You don't ask someone, because the traditional way is you give a camera to a person, kuha mo naman ako ng solo shot, solo Kodak, okay? Groupie, okay? More so in groupie. For everyone, I'll take a picture, I'll take a camera, I'll take a picture, including myself. I'm included in the picture. But traditionally, when there's a group of people that wants to be photoed, you ask a person, take a photo of us. But now it's not that way. It's groupie. The person taking the photo is part of the picture. That's acculturation. You borrow elements. Okay? When you use the word Google is now associated with research. Acculturation. Google is an American company. You borrow that term, use it in the Filipino culture. When you say Google, i-Google mo. You say, research about it. Okay. When a Filipino starts to speak in Mandarin, in French, okay, in Tamil, in the language in Timor-Leste, in Portuguese or Spanish, that's acculturation. You borrow words and you speak because that's not your native tongue. That's acculturation. A Tagalog-speaking person from Manila learns to speak Ilocano, Bisaya, that's acculturation. Okay po. Next. Okay. This is the first principle. Okay. Man and culture. Man's true and full humanity is realized in culture. Man's true and full humanity is realized in culture. He expresses himself through culture and creates cultures. He expresses himself through signs, through symbols, through images. That's man. Man cannot exist without culture. Culture is part of man. The identity of a person is his culture. You know a Filipino if he's Filipino by the way he does things. When he eats 3 times a day rice, you know it's Filipino. Okay? You know a Filipino is Filipino when he takes a bath every day. Even in winter. Even in winter. Di ba? It's uncomfortable not to take a bath even if it's cold. You need to take a bath. Because man, we Filipinos is always attached to culture of hygiene. Taking a bath is hygiene. That's part of us as Filipinos. Okay? Chinese, they need to always eat noodles, dumplings, and vegetables. They can get 1 piece of cucumber and eat it as snack. But for Filipinos, for me, it's boring. Diba? But they cannot take that away from them because it's part of their culture. A Chinese is a person who eats noodles and dumplings and vegetables always. Okay? Okay, now, if that is the case, if man cannot exist without culture, this is the next point. A church or a lay community not in touch with culture is not in touch with man. If you are not in touch with the culture of the people that you're serving, then you are not in touch with the person that you're evangelizing. If you are not aware of the culture of the person that you are pastoring, then you are not connected with the person that you're evangelizing. A church, a lay community composed for Christ should always be in touch with the culture of the people that we serve. Because man cannot exist without culture. Okay. Next one. Mission and culture. Because of Matthew 28 verse 19, which is what? What's Matthew 28:19? Yes, the Great Commission. Okay, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, blessing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Because of this Great Commission, mission and culture is always unavoidable because it allows people. Mission allows people in mission to encounter people of different culture. Because of this mandate. Because you always follow Matthew 28:19 because it's a commandment of Jesus. And if you go to different places out of your comfort zone, of the place of your origin, then you will always meet culture. Mission will always allow us to meet, encounter, and involve in culture. Okay? Prior to Vatican II, okay, I'll give you a brief background po. Prior to Vatican II, the church's mindset is unity in uniformity. I'll say that again. Unity in uniformity. They always say that we can always be one if we just have one culture all over the world. All Catholic churches all over the world will always just follow one certain culture. And that's the reason why we have the Latin Mass. Remember that? That's one way of the expression of that philosophy, of that mindset. Unity is uniformity. Latin Mass. Anywhere you go, Latin Mass. You cannot say it in your own vernacular. Latin Mass. Bibles before are just written in Latin. The Protestants were the first ones to translate the scriptures to the vernacular. That's why the Protestant religion, their spread is very fast because they translated it into the vernacular. Okay, so that's the mindset. And how did the church fulfill it? Through exploration. Di po ba? You can remember in history, when Magellan came to the Philippines, he was with priests, missionaries, because that's the way of evangelization before of the church. They go with explorers, with those who are in exploration. Okay, the Spaniards and the Portuguese. Okay, and they spread it. When we say Mass, it's Latin Mass. But now, acknowledging the various cultures, the church or lay community speaks of its feature, which is Catholicity or universal. If the church, if Corpus or Christ, founded in 117 countries and territories, acknowledges that there are various cultures all over the world, and their members are part of those cultures, okay, then we acknowledge our identity being universal, being Catholic. When we acknowledge that, yes, indeed, there are a lot of cultures all over the world, and you have acknowledged that, we acknowledge our identity being Corpus or Christ. Okay? Catholic, which is universal. Okay. Evangelization and culture and the inculturation of faith. Okay. Now, the next few slides po will answer the question how to sustain and initiate evangelization. These are my suggestions to everyone. Okay, evangelization of culture and inculturation of faith. Images. Okay, the incarnation. Inculturation was coined, okay, by Father Pedro Arupe, a Jesuit, and it was published in an official Vatican document during the papacy of John Paul II. Okay, so inculturation was just used by John Paul II in the 80s. Okay po, but it was coined by a Jesuit named Father Pedro Arupe. Okay. Okay. The first image, incarnation. Incarnation is Jesus, the Son of God, becoming man. You incarnate, you become flesh, carne. Flesh. Okay, carne, flesh. So in that image, the first image of inculture, just incarnation, Jesus took flesh and was subject to a Jewish culture. What are the cultures of the Jewish people that Jesus was subjected to? What was the prevailing Jewish culture during that time of Jesus? Yes, that's culture. When you go to the synagogue, that's a time when you listen to the teaching. When you go to the temple, that's a time when you sacrifice. Okay? What else? Food is bread, not rice. Food is bread, not rice. During that time, it's patriarchal. Men, the father of the family is very important because it's patriarchal. That's why in the cross, Jesus introduced Mary to John and John to Mary, so that Mary, okay, will always have a part in society because of John. Okay, during that time, it's prohibited by Jewish people for a Jew to eat with public sinners, with prostitutes, with tax collectors, especially those who are in the peripheries, those who are ill, those who have ketong, lepers, the lepers. They're not allowed. This is the part of the Jewish culture. And okay, Sabbath. When the sun sets on Saturday, that's Sabbath. Respect that. Jesus also celebrated the Last Supper. He also celebrated the Feast of the Tabernacles. Okay, Jesus also was raised in a society where women cannot be a witness, because whatever women say is not permissible. It's not permissible. Okay, it's not believable. It's only what the men will say that's believable. That's why, in contradictory, Jesus appeared to a woman first than to a man, so that it can always say that what these women will say is true, because I appeared to them, not to men. That's society, that's culture. Okay. Okay, next. Because Jesus was born in a culture, he needs to use that culture to proclaim his message, to proclaim the kingdom of God. And how did he do it? Through the parables. What are the different parables? You've got the parable of the leaven. Okay? The sower. Okay. Look, tingnan po nyo. Parable of the sower. The sower is a person who through sow seeds, because the people before are their way of life is agriculture, so people can easily connect. When you talk about parable of the sower, when you talk about a parable of the leavened bread, because they eat bread, then they need to bake. It's natural for its lifestyle. It's part of the culture. When you talk about the lost sheep, there are people who have shepherds. So when you talk about the lost sheep, shepherds can easily connect with them because that's how they live their life. Lost coin, okay? Money is important. Okay? The lamp, okay? The lamp is hidden under a bushel, okay? Because there's no electricity at that time. Di ba? Will Jesus use a light bulb in that time? Because there's no light bulb, so he needs to use a lamp. There's no electricity. He needs to borrow, he needs to acculturate things to talk about his message, the kingdom of God. Now, because of that, this is what we call now the logos spermaticos, or what we call the
Camera
seeds.
yan. Camera yan ni ano.
Oo, natutok lang.
Okay po, sige. The logos spermaticos. The logos spermaticos is coined by Justin the Martyr, which is a Latin word that when you translate it, it's the seeds of the word.
Sige.
Seeds of the word.
Power nung pwede
Ang
dito, di
buto
ba?
ng salita. Seeds of the word. Okay, logos spermaticos. What does it say? When you say that the seeds of the gospel or the seeds of the word,
Audio. Pati video.
it says,
Audio, video.
okay, because of this word, there are traces of the gospel values seen in all cultures. In all cultures, you will always see traces of gospel values because of the logos spermaticos. Traces of gospel values in different cultures. So, when you talk about the culture of, when you talk about Chinese culture, they also, sorry? Okay. When you talk about gospel values, in a Chinese culture, regardless if they're Catholic or not, you will see that in their culture, you will see that there's peace. You can see that there's they also celebrate joy. They believe in joy. They believe in unity. Time out. Alright. Okay. Okay. There. Okay. Okay, so there are traces of gospel values in different cultures, regardless if they are Christians or not. Talk about peace, it's universal. Talk about love, it's universal. Talk about unity, it's universal. Talk about forgiveness, it's universal. Islam, they talk about peace, which we also talk about peace, which is also gospel value. Logos spermaticos, the seeds of the gospel is seen, can be seen in all cultures. Okay. So what is our task being missionaries? Our task being missionaries connected to this, we need to search for that seed. What is that seed? What is that seed which is the gospel value hidden in the culture of the people that we serve? Search for that. It might take time, but search for that because there will always be seeds there. Seeds. Okay? Tolstoy say, where God is there, love is. Where love is there, God is. Tolstoy. Which is true. When you talk about love, there's God. Search for it. And when you have found that seed or the seeds, let it grow. Let it take root in the culture by nourishing it, by pointing to the people, look, in your culture, Jesus is already here. Because your culture talks about love. Your culture talks about familial respect. Your culture talks about union of strengthening the families. Those are gospel values, and Jesus talks about that. In that way, you allow the seed to grow and to take root. Search for it. Seeds. There will always be seeds there. Okay. Next na image. Second image is the Paschal mystery. Jesus' resurrection made it possible for him to belong to all cultures through proclamation of the gospel to all nations. What is the Paschal mystery? That's the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Okay? If in the incarnation, when he became man, he proclaimed the truth. When he died and rose again, okay, salvation happened. So this is another image of inculturation. When Jesus died, okay, he was not anymore bound. Okay, he was not anymore bound to the culture of the Jews, but he's now it's now already part of all cultures of people. More so during Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came down from heaven, and people outside the upper room, okay, heard their own native tongue. Did they hear what are the things about the culture? No. What they heard is the proclamation of the gospel through their language. That's inculturation. That's the image of Paschal mystery. The death, passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Okay. So what is the point of the Paschal mystery? The point of the Paschal mystery is the point of the Paschal mystery is inward renewal or conversion. What values in the culture that are in conformity with the gospel, and what are those that run counter with it? So in the incarnation, you look for those seeds. When you search, when you discover those seeds, you make it grow, take root. But in the Paschal mystery, you don't just make the seeds grow. You tell people that these other cultures, okay, values run counter from the gospel. So there's an inward conversion. There's an inward transformation. So when you see that in their culture, there's a culture of life, but in the same culture, there's also a culture of death. You tell them, okay, death is not according to the teachings of Jesus, but we need to always focus on life. These values are found in your culture. Take away that run counters with the gospel. Let those who are based on gospel values take root. Okay, now, evangelization and enculturation. Okay. Incarnate gospel values in culture, that's incarnation. Authentic faith that didn't compromise faith. Okay. Now, in incarnation, you let it take root. In the Paschal mystery, there's an inward conversion because you tell them that this is wrong and it is right. This is against the gospel and this is not against the gospel. Okay? And now, because of that procedure, you now enculturate faith. Faith that is enculturated has its expressions, but it's always Catholic. Enculturated faith is indigenous, yet Catholic. Indigenous, yet Catholic. When you enculturate faith, you make that faith African, yet Catholic. You make that faith Chinese, yet Catholic. You make that faith American or Canadian, yet Catholic. Because it is indigenous. It's based in the culture. But always within the elements and the teachings of our Catholic Church. Okay. Okay po. Okay. Enculturation the evangelization of culture and the enculturation of faith will always go hand in hand. You cannot separate the two. You can never enculturate faith. You can never make faith indigenous and Catholic if you do not evangelize culture. It goes hand in hand. It goes together. Dapat lagi po magkasama. And if we are successful in inculturating faith, this happens. Okay. Popular piety. Popular piety is a perfect example of inculturated faith. What's this? Sinulog. Okay. They get based on the books. The people in Cebu started to have sinulog because of the time when the Santo Niño was rediscovered. Because the time when it was given as a gift, it got lost. But when it was rediscovered, they were very happy and then they celebrated sinulog. Because Santo Niño was rediscovered. Our Lady of Guadalupe. Our Lady of Guadalupe is the perfect example of inculturated faith. Our Lady of Guadalupe, okay, as you can see, here there's a ribbon, midrib, above the womb. And according in Mexico, where the Aztecs live, the tribal Aztecs, when you see a person, a woman, wearing a ribbon on midrib above the womb, it says that the woman is pregnant. Okay? As you can see, the costume is culturally bound because it's the culture of the Aztec women. You can see there are stars because Aztec culture always follow cosmology. Okay, the stars. Our Lady of Guadalupe is an inculturated faith. That happens when we evangelize culture, okay, and inculturate faith. This is what happens. Another one. Simbang Gabi. In the liturgy, Simbang Gabi, it's Filipino way of faith. 9 days, 9 nights before Christmas or 9 early mornings before Christmas, you do this, novena. Okay? In the African liturgy, they don't have organs, they don't have guitars. They use percussions and drums because that's the way of their life. Africa is known for drums. Have you ever attended an African mass? For those who have attended an African mass, you can understand what I'm saying. When people sing in the liturgy of an African mass, automatically, men will have their own tone, women will have their own tone, but they will always blend together. If you cannot imagine, look for the movie Lion King in YouTube. The soundtrack, that's African. You understand what I'm saying? Inculturated faith is seen in the liturgy. Have you ever attended the Misa ng Sambayanang Pilipino? Misa ng Sambayanang Pilipino is an inculturated Filipino mass. In that mass, usually in what we have in the Philippines, okay, especially in other dioceses, whenever we do communion, it's the priest who eats first, and after that, he distributes the hosts to the parishioners, to the mass goers. But in the Misa ng Sambayanang Pilipino, okay, because Filipino culture, whenever we throw a party, it's not the owner of the house who eats first, it's the guests who eat first, right? Ganun din po sa Misa ng Sambayanang Pilipino. The priest will not eat the bread first, but he will distribute it first. And after that, he will eat it. Before reading the gospel or the readings, the readers will ask for a blessing from the priest presider because mano is a sign of respect. In Nepal, instead of the priest kissing the gospel after reading it, they don't kiss it, they put it on the forehead because that's a sign of respect. Inculturated mass, liturgy, okay, in our own culture, that's a sign. That's a perfect example of inculturated faith. What are other people that are models of inculturation? I'll give you two particular people. First is what we call, the first one is Matteo Ricci. For those who are from China, you know who he is. Matteo Ricci is an Italian Jesuit that was sent to China to study, to do mission. What he did, in the early days, They need missionaries only wear a black cassock. Okay? If you're a priest, you're bound to wear the black cassock. But because Mateo Ricci was sent to China, and Chinese people don't wear black cassocks, and he's an intellectual because he's good in math, in cosmology, okay, in reading the stars. Okay, he's very good at it. What he did, he took off the black cassock and wore the Confucian robe. Because Confucius is a Chinese philosopher and teacher and is very well respected. He needs to wear that so that people would see that this person is intellectual. And when he started to share whatever he learned in mathematics, in architecture, in sciences, especially in cosmology, Chinese elite, especially those who are intellectuals, got attracted to him. Why? Because he has something to share. But people saw him not an outsider, but a Confucian. As you all know, stars are very important in the Chinese culture because that's where they base their lunar calendar. Mooncake Festival, the Chinese New Year are all important because of the arrangement of the stars. And Mateo Ricci knows about it. He shared it. What are other examples that he did? There are no existing Mandarin words for Chinese terms. So he coined what he called Tian Chu. I hope I pronounce it right. Tian Chu. That's translated as Lord of Heaven. Lord of Heaven, Tian Chu. And upon research, upon reading the ancient books of the Chinese, he discovered that indeed in the Chinese literature and in the Chinese books, they call Tian, there's a word Tian that refers to heaven. And there's a word Shangti that refers to a sovereign Lord. So he said that the word I used, it's culturally based. Because Tian and Shangti talks about a divine God who knows everything. A divine God who judges what is right and what is wrong. A divine God who punishes the evil and blesses the good. And he said at the end, Shangti, okay, and Tian is what we have in the Catholic Church. Jesus, God. He made a connection. Okay, spoke very well. Another thing in contention was the veneration of the ancestors. Have you ever seen Chinese people using incense to venerate the ancestors? In the early times, it's not allowed. But he said that this can be a way for us to evangelize if we accept the right in the Catholic teaching. Because it's not religious. He pointed out the reason why they give respect to their ancestors, it's a filial love. A love to their family. It's giving respect. It's allowed. It's not religious. It's just giving respect. And when you go to marry the queen in San Juan, you'll see a portion there where they can venerate the saints. Cultural. Next. We have, he said, the good customs in the countries of the Christians, of the falseness of idolatry, of the conformity of the law of God with natural reason and similar teachings found in the writings of the ancient sages of China. Whatever we have, it's also found in the writings of the Chinese people. Next person. His name is Roberto Di Nobili. Po. Yes, daw.
There are many businessmen in the Philippines, Chinese kumeno. Meron silang Santo Niño and then Buddha
Yes.
side by side. So, anong ano ito?
Yes, okay. When you talk about, of course, the first thing is that you ask them, are you Buddhist or are you Catholic? Okay, if they're Catholics, then you need to tell them. You need to tell them that, yes, you are Catholic. Okay, yes, you're Catholic, but in your altars, I think it's a common thing that you see in the altars. You see Jesus. What's that? What you call that? Hello Kitty. Okay, and Buddha. That's where you still look for the evangelical culture, Tito. You point them out that if you're Catholic, God is the only one who can provide. God is the only one who is the source of all things. Because you need to look for the seeds of the word, and when you find it, you take it root, because I think the root, okay, the seed has not yet sprouted. They haven't yet understood what they're doing, especially in their Catholic faith. Okay? I think enculturation is a long process. It's not just a 1 week process, a long process. You need to let them always understand. It will take a long process. But it's a surest way of evangelization. Okay po? I remember one Chinese, I think his name is Peter. He's from Beijing. Oh, John. I told him, John, here in the Philippines, Filipino Chinese, even the Philippines are very fond of feng shui. Do you believe in feng shui? Because feng shui is a Chinese culture. Yes, I do believe in feng shui, but scientifically, not religiously. It's only God who can provide, not feng shui. That's enculturated faith. Okay po? Okay. Let's go now to Robert Nobili. Robert de Nobili is a Jesuit Italian also, sent to India. Okay? He was sent to live amongst the fishermen in a remote island. Okay? But afterwards, he was sent to a particular place in the southern part of India. Okay? Where he saw that evangelization is not really doing good. And he just found out that the Indians refer to Portuguese or to the missionaries, okay? They call them as parangis. Parangis. So, and he found out that parangis mean, okay? It means, okay, unclean. Unclean. Those are polluted. Those are uncultured. Why? Because these missionaries eat and drink a lot. They eat beef. Okay? They do not take a bath every day. Okay? And when Robert Nobili found that out and he wants to evangelize the people where he was sent, he said, this is my plan. I will disassociate myself from the missionaries. I will take away my cassock, my black cassock, and wear this saffron robe. That's very much Buddhist Hindu. I'll take on my cassock, I'll take off my cassock, take on the saffron robe, okay? I will only speak Tamil, which is the language of the people in southern India. Okay? I will put a sandalwood paste on my forehead. Para po siyang, alam niyo po yung parang, iba po yung pula, yung iba kulay orange. Bola, orange. And it denotes intellectual, a teacher. So that's what he did. He put sandalwood paste on his forehead, he shaved his head, and he would like to live like an ascetic, just like this, a sannyasi. This is a person, is a holy man, a sannyasi.
Naliligo yan?
I think so. Okay? And as you can see, there's a similarity between the two. Okay? It's not the missionary wearing a black cassock, but a sannyasi. And then what he did was, okay, because he wants to evangelize the person on top of the social class. Because remember, in India, there's a what we call the caste system. We've got the Brahmins, we've got the Rajas. The Brahmins are the priests. The Rajas, these are the warriors or the rulers. We've got the Vaishyas, we've got the laborers, the traders, the merchants. And we've got at the bottom are the Dalits, or the street sweepers. The ones that collect the human waste in the toilets, the Dalits. 4. So he said, I cannot evangelize the caste system if I do not evangelize first the Brahmins. So he looked like a Brahmin. And what he did, he had he had a friend that is a school teacher, but he's also Hindu. And then he asked him, can you teach me and can you let me read the Vedas or the Upanishads? These are the old religious scriptures of the Hindu people that's like the Bible for us in amongst the Christians. And he said, there are a lot of gospel values here. And because of that, he told them, okay, it's okay. It's okay for Catholics to always shave their head and have like this. That's a Catholic. It's a Catholic, if you are Brahmin, you need to have a thread, because that's a social mark that says that you are on top of the class. That's a Brahmin. Brahmins can only wear this. He inculturated it. And then, he was successful. He was able to understand Sanskrit, write Sanskrit, and translated all the catechism into Sanskrit. Inculturation. He said, religion was by no means dependent on caste. Indeed, it must be one for all, the true God being one for all, although, he added, unity of religion destroys not the civil distinction of castes, nor the lawful privileges of the nobles. So my brothers and sisters, evangelization of culture will lead to enculturated faith. Okay. When we always evangelize culture, that's the surest way to enculturate faith. As a result, evangelization. As a result, evangelization. Now, after seeing the CFC reality, the principles afterwards, let's go now to the last part, which is my suggested pastoral actions. What are the suggested pastoral actions we need to take? First, dialogue. Okay, dialogue. Okay. Yeah, that's what Robert Nobili said. Okay, I will not eat meat. I'll just eat vegetables. I'm used to take bath not as often as I can, but because I'm a Brahmin, I need to take bath every day. Inculturate. Okay. First, dialogue. When we dialogue, we apply the image of the incarnation and the image of the Paschal mystery. Taking root, making the gospel values take root and convert the culture, not from the outside, but from the inside, from the cultural images that they use. We can only achieve dialogue if we understand the levels of enculturation. First is receive, second is celebrate, and third is live and translate. When we talk about receive, this is when a person proclaims the gospel. The first time you step into the place and you proclaim the gospel. And people receive it. Okay. After that, when they receive it, because they saw that, okay, it's true, now let's go now and celebrate it. So you'll have mass. You now start to build a community. Okay? And after that, after celebrating, after months and years of celebration, that they now believe that whatever they celebrate is true, then they now move to the third point, to the third level, the live and translate, where the people that have received the gospel tell those who have given them, those who have proclaimed that these are the images that we use in the culture. Can we now substitute this to the images that you have used so that it will always be enculturated? That's live and translate. This is where dialogue happens. This is where dialogue happens. For example, okay, receive, when we reach to a new place, we proclaim the gospel, we start CFC. When they start CFC, we celebrate, we now conduct the CLPs, the youth camps, and they now start to have the formation tracks. They start to live a Christian way of living based on the context of Corpus for Christ. But after celebration, the live and translate, people will now say Chinese. For example, to take context of Chinese or China. Brothers and sisters, we do not sing the way you sing. Can we sing the way we sing? But also sing gospel messages? Okay. So now that's where the dialogue happens. They tell us something, we listen, okay, and think, is it okay or not? Okay, so that's where dialogue happens. This is where we should always reach, not just to celebrate. Dapat dito po dapat dialogue. Because dialogue, that's where enculturation happens. Dialogue, we are assured of evangelization. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll go back here po. Sorry po. So leave and translate. Now, I want to raise up questions. If dialogue is a way of listening for us from Manila, from the people that we serve in the different countries, dialogue, they tell us, because in culture, this is how we can interpret it. Okay? They will ask us. So these are the questions I want to raise. Should we still use kuya, ate, tito, and tita whenever we address brothers and sisters in Corpus or Christ in foreign lands? If we want to reach dialogue, do we always tell them that this is how we should sing, even if it's not the way they sing it? If it's in dialogue, should we conduct more family activities, because familial piety is very strong in the culture? When we talk about dialogue, should Filipino speakers opt to use non-English terms during their talks to drive major points? In terms of dialogue, should speakers use examples during talks based on culture? That when you give a talk in Africa and you want to talk about life, you talk about water, about rain, because that's life for them. These are questions. Next one. So how can we reach now the third level? We can reach the third level if we use the 3 F's. Form. First one is form. Form is the shape or cultural pattern. It answers who, what, where. When you talk about December 25, it's just a date. When you talk about the first new moon between January 21 and February 2020, it's just a date. When you talk about this, it's just a piece of paper. That's it. Okay? So that's the shape. Second, form, function. It answers what is the purpose of the form. It answers the question, why? When you put function to a form, then that becomes an image. Ulitin ko po. When you put function to a form, it becomes an image, because an image connotes meaning. When you put function to a form, then you appreciate the meaning of the form. Okay po? For example, okay, clothes. Clothes, it's just a piece of cloth. That's form. Function. Now you ask, why do you wear clothes?
Not to get cold.
Sorry?
Not to get cold.
Yes, purpose. So that you won't get cold. So that people will not say that you're insane, because an insane person has no clothes. Okay? They don't wear clothes. They're naked. When you wear clothes, it can denote social status. It can denote if you're a man or a girl. It can denote if you're an African, Chinese, American, Indian, or Filipino. Because a Filipino will not wear a Chinese clothing. We will wear Filipino clothing. Okay? That's function. It tells why. It asks why and answers the question why. Okay. In Africa, you might wonder, how come men don't enter the kitchen? In African culture, how come men don't enter the kitchen? Because the kitchen is only for the wives or the women. Men are not allowed to be there. Diba? Huh? It's true. When we were able to live with an African family, I used to wash dishes. That's my role at home. So because of my natural instinct to wash dishes and to help in the household chores, I went straight to the kitchen. The sister, the wife, panicked. No, 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 brother, get out of the kitchen. It's not your place. Okay? Maan can enter, but not me. Because the kitchen is for women. And we need to understand that. We need to understand that. We don't impose what we believe in. We follow what the culture says. Okay. For example po,
Well, in China, our hosts would not like us to help in the kitchen, bring the dishes back to the kitchen.
if that's generally Chinese culture, then follow it. I think it's not a way of disrespect. Because it's culture, it's their culture. Okay? For example po, ito, I'll give you some examples. Okay, look at this. This is a picture of two men in Africa, and what is very much striking, holding hands. Okay, in holding hands. In the Philippines, you will always say, naku. Okay, questionable. But in Africa, you ask, why do they hold hands? Because it's a sign of friendship. A sign of friendship. It's not just man and woman holding hands, but even men and women can hold hands. Both men can hold hands. Friendship. That's okay. That's function. Okay. What's this? Dragon. In the European culture, dragon is evil. Yan yung tinapakan ni Maria sa Biblia. But in the Chinese culture, dragon is blessing, prosperity, joy. That's the function. You ask them, okay, in the Chinese culture, I'm in China, I can see a dragon, though the Bible says that that's the one that Mary put his step on. But in the Chinese culture, I cannot say that that's how we interpret it. Because in the Chinese culture, the dragon is a one who bestows blessings. We can now associate Jesus or God to a dragon who bestows blessings. What's this? Ano po yan? Necklace. Okay. But actually, it's not the necklace that I want to point out. The beads. The beads. Beads is just a normal thing, a jewelry. But amongst the Manobo tribe, when you give a woman beads, okay, and he uses beads to come up with something, it can be a way of prayer for the Manobo women. That whenever they use beads in clothing, in shoes, sandals, or in their clothes, it's a form of prayer. Same thing amongst the Zulu people of South Africa, one of the biggest tribes. When a woman uses beads and forms it as a jewelry and gives it to a man, that's a love language. There's a particular meaning in every color of the bead in that jewelry. Function. Okay? This is a Maori woman. And you can see a Maori woman has a tattoo on the chin, on the lower lip. It's a sign of strength, of courage. For us Filipinos, when you see a Filipino wearing a tattoo, sanggano yan. Galing sa loob. Adik. Okay? But in the context of the Maori people, it's strength, especially for women. It's seldom for the Filipinos to have women have tattoos. Maori culture, lips. It's also part of the Maori culture. Okay? It's saying hello, hi, I welcome you, you're my friend. Instead of shaking hands, they do this. They let their nose touch each other. Okay? Culture. That's the function. Why? Why is it important? Because of the third F. Feeling. What emotions are charged? What emotions or attitudes generated from the function? Oh, when I see an infant, form, function is, that's life. I put meaning to the form, that's life. So if it's life, what are the emotions generated from the function? I need to protect life. I need to love life because that's African culture. Okay po? So these are the 3 Fs. Next, missionaries. Last 15 minutes. Missionaries. For us missionaries, first and foremost, we need to immerse in the culture of the people. Learn about our faith in the culture of the people that we serve. The best way to learn the culture, go to the museum. Go to the museum. You'll get to learn their culture there. That's what I did when I went to New Zealand. I went to a museum and I learned their culture. As missionaries, it's not just proper for us to learn culture, but we need to learn about our faith. Because you cannot discover the gospel values if you're not well acquainted with our faith. Study catechism. Culture, learning culture and learning faith goes hand in hand. Read magazines, journals. Learn the language. Learn the language. If you can just use language, even just one word and translate it in the major points of your talk, instead of saying the word in English, but you translate it in a term in their language, then you get your message across. For sure. Learn the language. It's a blessing for me that I can speak and understand Bisaya, Ilocano, and Hiligaynon. In that way, if the people that I meet in a different place cannot really express themselves, I tell them, you can speak in your own tongue. I can understand, and I converse with them in their own tongue. That's a blessing for me. Okay? Learn the language. It can really give you a lot of opportunities. Yeah. Okay. Next. Okay. When you immerse, you ask people, what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of that rite? You ask the meaning. So that when you get the meaning, you know how to, you can have now a better understanding of that image. Ask the meaning po, ask the meaning. Okay? Next. Adapt with culture. When we say adapt with culture, because adapting to culture is the first step for you to evangelize culture. You enter into the culture. That's the time when they took out the black cassock and wore the saffron robe, the confusion robe. That's adaptation. When you adapt, when people in your place eats at 1 o'clock for lunch, and you get hungry at 12 noon, fast for another hour. Ang hirap kaya nung napunta kaya kami ng Botswana, 1:00 ang kain namin. 12:00 ang kain natin dito. Okay? Adapt. If they only eat twice a day, then eat twice a day. What can we do? Okay? At times, it's a blessing if we have a mission house. Because in the mission house, you can be a Filipino. But if not, if you are hosted with a local CFC host, then adapt with their lifestyle. If they only eat bread for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, then eat bread. If they only eat maize meal, pap, that's alam niyo po yung maize meal na corn, tapos nalagyan ng tubig, tapos para siyang maize meal is corn flour. They add water, mix it until it becomes thick. It's like a sort of pudding. And that maize meal is like rice. They eat it with stew. If that's how they do it, then eat it. Amongst the pastoral workers, okay, when in their final interview, if we get to discover that the pastoral worker or the trainee applying for pastoral work told us that they had a hard time eating vegetables in Baguio because it's a vegetable country, because vegetables is the only thing that they serve at home, we tell them, okay, you won't get approved yet, you will be extended until the time you learn how to eat vegetables. Because that's how the way we do it. You cannot impose, I don't eat vegetables. I do not eat pap, I only eat rice. Okay? Okay? We need to adapt. Okay? It's good for you to buy your own their local costume. Like for instance, in going to mass in Africa, whenever they go to mass, they wear their African costumes. It's like a way of respect. And if you have the opportunity to buy that, buy one. And during local festivities, wear that. Sunday masses, wear that. In big gatherings, wear that, so that people would see, oh, this Filipino is African indeed. Okay. Learn the accent. Learn the accent. If you can speak English, good. But if you can speak the way they speak English, better. Better. Okay. The way they speak French in Seychelles is different from the way they speak French in France. I told MJ, the one who is assigned in Mauritius, MJ, they speak French there with a different accent. I know you can speak French, but speak the way they speak it. Adapt. Okay. We need to be mindful of colors. Mindful of colors. If you go to a Chinese wake, you need to wear white. If you want to project prosperity or red, okay, blessings, red. Be mindful of colors because colors might have different meanings. Okay, yung pala ang pinuntahan mo party, ang suot mo pangluluksa. Be mindful of that. Okay? And of course, celebrate with their local festivities. Okay. Mindfulness of the new Areopagus. There are new places where people flock. And you need to be mindful of that. Have you ever encountered the Pope sending his video message to the National Football League Hall of Famers, telling them that whatever values you have in that athletic league are the same values that we want to espouse that we also espouse in the Christian way of living. Let's have an encounter. NFL is a big thing in the US. It draws millions of people to watch, particularly in the Super Bowl, the finals. Artists in Hollywood would pay huge amounts of money for them to stage a show at halftime. It's not the league that will pay them. They pay the league for them to perform. That's how big it is. So, Pepsi. Coke cannot enter Super Bowl. It's only Pepsi. So, because that's a new Areopagus. And when the Hall of Famers came to visit Pope Francis in NFL, in Vatican, he made a message addressing the National Football League. Let's have an encounter. Acculturation encounter. You can browse it sa YouTube po, doon po siya. Okay? Tourism. If you get to see that people would like to go to parks, especially in New Zealand or in Australia, they spend a lot of time in parks, then go there. If you can see people in the Philippines here that they go spend time in food hubs, in mga street parks, then go there. These are new Areopagus. Educational institutions. Education, Ecclesia in America, Church in America. 71 says, education can play an outstanding role in promoting the enculturation of the gospel. Let's maximize education. In the family ministries where we have the campus-based KFC, the school-based, maximize it because that's where we can really inculturate faith through education. Okay? Create cultural centers. This is one suggestion that I want to throw for the international conferences of handmaids in the family ministries. Have a time where you can gather people and express themselves. Okay? For example, this is what we call the cultural centers. Art exhibits, literary arts, and songs. That one is a mother and a child. This is an African stone sculpture. It's a mother and a child, but in a Christian perspective, it connotes the love of the mother to a child, the importance of life, not aborting it. It's seen in sculpture, it's seen in arts, it's seen in hapag ng pag-asa. This is inculturated faith. May snatcher, hindi naman ganyan itsura ng mga apostol sa unang panahon. Si Filipino, hapag ng pag-asa is inculturated faith. What I want to address is, come up with cultural centers. Invite people. If they have, if you can see that handmaids of the Lord would like to come up with writing poems, then let it be, and then have a place where they can just express it. If they know how to paint Christian, a Catholic way of painting, then have an exhibit of that. Sculpture, have one. Songs, have one. In YFC, in SFC, create cultural centers where we can really inject and let people see Christian teachings. Kapag ng pag-asa. Culture. Last 2 slides. Social media. Maximize social media. Twitter, Facebook, but don't only focus on social media. If the country or the area where you're serving, a lot of people are always attuned to AM station, especially radio, then use radio. That goes to Africa. That goes to Africa. In some parts of Asia, where radio is still a good means of communication because people always have a radio. They don't listen to FM, they listen to AM. Okay? Ensure smooth transition from family ministries to couples for Christ. The children of Filipinos who migrated to different countries, if they grow up, they now imbibe in them the culture of the land. And if we ensure that these children will go to CFC, then they can be the best vehicles to inculturate faith because they have the understanding of the Catholic faith. At the same time, they imbibe in them the culture of the land. It's only through the family ministries, letting them transition smoothly to CFC, we can have an assurance of sustainability and evangelization. Last point. Inculturation is decisive for evangelization. I will repeat that. Inculturation is decisive. It's an important element. It's a surest way of evangelization. Because just like what John Paul II said in May 20 of 1982, he said, particularly when he commissioned the Commission on Cultures. Tama ba dito? There's a particular Commission on Cultures in Vatican. Pope John Paul II established that. He said, faith which does not become culture is a faith which has not been fully received, not thoroughly thought through, not fully lived out. Let's focus on culture. Let's not reject it, acknowledge it. We acknowledge our identity as Catholics, as universal. But at the same time, inject faith. Let the seeds of the word take root. It becomes a plant, bears fruits that others will also enjoy. Maraming salamat po sa inyo lahat. Magandang hapon po.